Welcome to Prophecy Talk, and this is not my usual show. I'm actually giving a review of the GE electric range with the Sensi Temp top because unfortunately this range has become a nightmare and is a nightmare and it takes so long to cook on this stove that I can't get to making videos. So let me tell you a little bit about my experience with this nightmare stove. This stove reminds me of what Microsoft did a few years back when they came out with one of their Windows, and it was such a disaster because it took people backwards instead of moving forward. And this is basically what the Sensi Temp top, and that's what one looks like, it's to my right, does. You go to cook with your normal cooking methods and your pans, and the stove continuously turns off. So you're thinking you're bringing something to a boil, and as the women and men who cook know, a lot of your recipes call for a pot to be brought to a boil and then a simmer. And you can't do that with this stove. This stove is actually, or the Sensi Temp technology, which GE adopted, and apparently other stove manufacturers are also adopting, and is going to become the norm unless you have a gas stove. Well, you've got to change all the cookbooks, all the recipes, because this stove completely changes the ball game when it comes to cooking. Well, let me tell you what this stove does. First of all, it has a high it has a high setting, which it should remove because nothing cooks on high, because every time you cook something on high, the stove, the burner turns off and shuts itself off continuously. And so what they recommend is to always cook with a lid, because of the stove cycling like this. I don't know what drug the engineer was on that designed this thing, but obviously they were on something, and they're now laughing all the way to the bank that they produced this joke of a stove, and you buy it thinking you're buying a regular electric stove that's probably got an updated top. You have no idea the nightmare that you are in for. So that's what this stove does. It continuously turns off, doesn't like certain pots and pans. It's very temperamental. It almost has its own personality. Certain pots it likes, certain pots it doesn't. I was told by customer service that a brand called Chantel, which now I am selling on my Amazon influencer. If you want to get a set, if you have this nightmare of a stove and you need the Chantel pots, Amazon has a good price. And actually the Chantel pots I like because they're geared for energy efficiency. So they're good whether you have this stove or not, because they use less energy, which means less time that your burner is burning. But apparently, I don't even know if those pans, even though customer service said that that's what GE would recommend, because I want to read you some of what the Sensi Temp actually states. And I don't even know if the stove will work in the traditional way with this. Let's see. Use cookware that has a flat bottom. Well, all of my cookware has a flat bottom, and certain cookware still turns off. You should not be able to pass a nickel coin under a straight edge pressed against the bottom of the cookware. Okay, so now this becomes a project to test all of your pots and pans to see if they're going to work with this stove. Match the bottom diameter of the cookware to the size of the coil. Do not use cookware that is not flat on the bottom. Well, I'm going to tell you something. The stove doesn't like all flat cookware. Okay. Do not use small cookware or cookware with a small bottom on a large coil. Well, we know that from previous stoves. But this is what it tells you to do. Reduce the power level to the point where cooking may be performed at a lower temperature. Now, that's what I want to tell you, that if any of you have this nightmare stove and the only way to cook on it is to not cook on high. The minute you cook on high, your stove is going to turn off the burner. So I don't even know why they have a high setting. So don't cook on high. And you bring your dish to a boil at a lower setting. It's the only way to get this stove to work. And even then, you're watching the stove because sometimes it still decides or may decide to turn off, because this stove has some kind of personality that decides whether it likes the pots or not, and what it's going to turn off and what it's going to keep cooking. Place a lid on the cookware to retain heat and maintain a boil as the coil cycles on and off. Well, this is a joke, because even with a lid, there's no boil that is maintained when the burner shuts off. As a matter of fact, what's in the pot cools down, and your pot is just sitting there, and anything you go to cook takes longer. Avoid using a pan or skillet with a heavy handle that lifts the bottom of the cookware off the coil. So anyway, I just wanted to read this. I wanted to tell you about my nightmare stove. I'm now stuck with this monstrosity, and there's nothing that you're going to be able to do about it, because they're switching over to this technology, and basically you have to cook your dishes on a lower setting to just get the stove not to turn off. So your cooking also will take longer. But what this does is many recipes, whether you're cooking, if you're cooking rice, if you're cooking soups, a lot of recipes, pasta, require bringing the water to a boil and then reducing the heat. Well, guess what? You're not going to be able to do that with this. You're going to have to adapt the recipes to be able to cook on this stove, and everything is going to take longer. So this stove is definitely a faux pas on the part of GE and any other company that may adopt it. I need to be on here telling and warning about this monstrosity that I am now stuck with, that makes my life difficult and actually takes more time to cook, and it's less time that I can be on here. But it was really a nightmare when I had a lot of cooking planned and various pots, and none of them, they're all shutting off. So I wanted to give this review and tell you what this thing is. If you can avoid it, if you can get a non-Sensi top, that's what I would do. And if not, you're going to be in a trial and error with your own Sensi top stove. And the only thing I found that works is do not cook on high, because it will automatically shut your pot off or shut the burner off. So the stove is ridiculous. The settings that are on there, it shouldn't even have on there. Hey, Jesus will reign. Good to see you. Sounds like a nightmare. It was, and it's one of the many nightmares that I've been dealing with, but I had to come on and give this review about this horrific stove, because it's basically changing recipes. You have to adopt every recipe to cook on this stove. They seem to think that this stove is modern technology, safety, it's safer because it shuts off, but there's definitely something that's wrong. That's terrible. That's funny. A conspiracy. It feels like that. What's inside the stove? I mean, it's almost like the thing has a personality and likes certain pots and doesn't like others. And they're all flat. So anyway, I just wanted to come on here. So if anyone is dealing with one of these stoves, and I know a lot of people have written, and you tune into this review, don't cook on high, cook on about 8, where it's at about 8. It will come to a boil. You just have to cook your cooking at a lower temperature so that your dishes will cook, and hopefully you still will not have this thing turn off your pan because it still might. Anyway, and if you've tuned in for the review, be sure to check out, if you're not familiar with Bible prophecy, it's a whole interesting topic, and you may want to check out my other videos and see what is said. And definitely, if you like what you see here, subscribe. Okay, folks, that's it for this. And meantime, God bless and stay tuned. I probably will have one more. The next one will not be a review. It will be news related, but I had to get this over and done with about my nightmare stove. Okay, God bless. See you guys again soon.